good evening, everyone. Hello, welcome to MTRI's fourth installment of the Summer Seminar Series. My name is Luca, and I'm a research technician here at the Mersey Tobiatic Research Institute, and I'm going to be your moderator for tonight. Before we begin, though, I would like to acknowledge that the MTRI is located in, and we are meeting from Keswick, one of the 7 districts of Mi'kmaq, home of the Mi'kmaq people. We acknowledge the treaties of peace and friendship, and we thank the Mi'kmaq people for their generosity in sharing their homeland with us. So for anyone that may be joining us for the first time tonight, and anyone that might have not heard of MTRI before, I would like to give a little bit of a background about us here. The MTRI is a research-based nonprofit organization nestled in Southwest Nova Scotia, near Cathy National Park and National Historic Site. And we're also located within the Southwest Nova Biosphere Reserve. Our mission is to promote, conserve, and sustain biodiversity in Keswick and beyond. Now, at this stage here, I would like to welcome and introduce tonight's co-speakers, Cathy LeBlanc and Dave Chapman. Cathy is a member of the Acadia First Nation, and she's formerly a cultural interpreter at Parks Canada, and she's now working as a regional physical activity consultant for the Nova Scotia Department of Communities, Culture, Tourism, and Heritage, and she's also the Two-Eyed Seeing Program Coordinator at Mount St. Vincent University. Our second speaker for tonight is Dave Chapman, who's a career physicist and defense scientist with the Government of Canada and an avid amateur astronomer. And he's also a fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada and the former editor of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada's Observer's Handbook, too. So tonight, Cathy and David will be sharing some traditional teachings about the moon cycles and their relation in the natural history of Mi'kmaq through two eyes with us, indigenous culture and Western astronomy. Before we begin the talk tonight, I would like to just remind everyone to please keep your mics muted. And if you do have any questions during the talk, feel free to just type them into the chat window and we'll relay them later at the end of the talk. And we will also have a designated question period at the end where you can just ask your questions live if you prefer to do that. And at this stage here, I would just like to hand over the seminar to you, Cathy and David. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that lovely introduction and land acknowledgement. We thank everyone for joining us tonight. I think I might have some friends who are watching that this will be the first time seeing a presentation. So hi to all of you. And hi to some people who might be joining us for the first time. So we want to start our presentation tonight, and we want to keep this interactive. So Dave and I do have a set presentation, but please, if you have questions, comments, put those in the chat, and we'll keep this as interactive as we can.
Well, thank you, Cathy. I'd just like to say thank you, MTRI, for inviting us to do this presentation. Some people may know that our project, Mi'kmaq Moons, actually was born in Ketchumkujik National Park and National Historic Site, which is just down the road. So it's kind of like coming home. That's where it all started. And the other thing I'd just like to mention is, I don't know how much turnover there is at MTRI, but I actually gave a presentation in person at MTRI in 2009 in August, as we were just talking to the park about becoming a dark sky preserve. And I myself and my colleague Quinn Smith gave a talk about light pollution in the sky and the importance of dark skies. So it'd be interesting to know if anybody that's listening tonight was present at that time. So this is actually my second time talking to you. And I'm very honored to be doing that with my project partner, Cathy. So our title slide represents, somebody said they remember it. Oh, thank you. So the title slide of late, since about last fall, is the cover of our book, Mi'kmaq Moons, The Seasons in Mi'kmaq by Formac Press. And we'll be talking to you about how you can, if you're interested, how you can acquire that. But, we've been doing this for quite a long time, this Two-Eyed Seeing project. We've got a lot of support from the community. And so we'll just take you along our journey. We can't take you along every step of the journey because it's about a 10-year journey. We'll just give you the highlights. But, there's a place you can go online where you can just read about everything we've ever written or thought about if you are so inclined. So, so I don't know, because here's another skill testing question of the people who are listening. Does anyone recognize this site, where this is? Yeah? Anyone? Well, I'll tell you after. Like Cathy, so what we have here is a picture. I'll tell you, I'll give you a hint. It's from inside of Keji, and it's from an island. And it's a picture I took because I've been to this spot many times to enjoy the dark skies. And I've seen these stars patterns emerge from the twilight, and it gets incredibly dark there. It's the darkest place I've ever been to on a good night. And on this night, I took this picture. On this night, there was an aurora, which is extremely rare. But I'm going to get Cathy to read, if she is willing, a little poem to get us started, which relates to these stars.
Yeah, and Dave, I've been reading this poem since we started the project, eh?
Yeah.
Every time we do a presentation. And I got my niece, Holly, who is featured in the book. When she's with us, I get her to read this. But in her absence, I will pick it up again. And this is from the book, The Old Man Told Us by Ruth Holmes Whitehead. And it's a great little book if you're looking to learn more about Mi'kmaq culture. I recommend picking this one up. So we are the birds of fire. We are the birds of fire. We are the stars which sing. We sing with our light. We are the birds of fire. We fly over the sky. Our light is a voice. We make a road for the spirits to pass over. Among us are 3 hunters who chase a bear. There never was a time when they were not hunting. We look down on the mountains. This is the song of the stars.
All right. So were there any takers? Did anybody figure out where this is from?
Yeah. We have someone from Facebook say Site 15.
Absolutely right. Give that person a prize. It's because of
Christine Hannum.
Oh, that's my wife. She's cheating. I should have said family members are not eligible on this. She's probably in the other room anyway. Oh, well, that's good. She's at least paying attention, which is more than what happens most days. Okay, so you may recognize some of the stars here. So some of you may have picked out the Big Dipper. I don't know can you see my cursor when I do this? Yeah? No?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
yeah.
So here's what we call in the Western world the Big Dipper, or at least in North America. And it's 7 bright stars. So here's the bowl of the Dipper, and then here's the handle of the Dipper. There's a Mi'kmaq sky story called Muin and the 7 Bird Hunters. And Muin is the bowl of the Dipper is Muin, the she bear. And then the first 3 bird hunters are robin, chickadee, and gray jay, which are in the handle of the Dipper. And for the other 4 hunters, we have to jump over to another constellation, which is called Buutes, the herdsman. Oops. And the stars are passenger pigeon, which sadly is extinct. Then blue jay, barred owl, and saw-whet owl. And well, it's not clear tonight, but if you go out any night now, you'll see the Dipper and the handle. And if you follow the curve of the handle, even in the city, you'll come to this star, which is called Arcturus, which it's the barred owl in the Mi'kmaq story. And Arcturus, it's kind of based on the Greek for the bear watcher. So there's a kind of a crossover here between Western and indigenous traditions, because when they in the poem and it says we're the three hunters, well, that's, I guess, these three here. In the Maliseet tradition, they're human hunters. Here they're birds, and as the stars rotate around the Polaris, these birds are always in pursuit of Muin, and so Arcturus, or the barred owl, is always watching the bear. So that's a bit of a crossover there, a bit of two-eyed seeing, sort of Western Greek and Roman constellations compared with the Muin story. I always enjoy when I'm there at night, going out when the sun sets, and then watching as the stars come out and seeing when they all come out. And we cannot tell the whole story here, partly because of reasons of time. But we do host on our Mi'kmaq Moons YouTube channel. There are videos where you can go and listen to the story. And we were asked to host those by the Marshall family. So we've put those on our site. I mean, they're not our stories, but we're allowing them to be viewed. And there's also a book, Muin and the Seven Bird Hunters, that you can buy from Nimbus Publishing. So there's quite a rich story there. And here's a little bit about us. Pictures down the line. We started working together, I would say, before 2013, but 2013 is when we kind of came up, I think, with the idea of doing something about the moon. That was when Cathy worked at Ketchum-Kuchik. Not very long after, her niece Holly got involved, and she's grown up. And how old is she now? 15 now?
She'll be 16 on August 18th. But yeah, it's so great to see. I was with Holly last night, and her passion when we saw the moon is still there. She's still she loves the moon. I love seeing her there with you too, Dave. That was the first time that she had met you, and there she is with her Keji star shirt on.
So Holly, of course, in the book we wrote, the characters in the stories are Holly and Auntie. So most people figured out that Holly was a real person, but a lot of people asked me, well, who's Auntie? Who's Auntie? And I said, well, it's Cathy, of course.
I do want to say too, Dave, because someone said this to me in a presentation I gave at a library in Bridgewater, that they have the book and they love reading it to their daughter, but they didn't know that some of what's in those stories are real life experiences that Holly and I shared together. So I
was going to confess that. So Holly and Auntie are characters in the book, and in the stories they teach about the moon and the seasons. So, but the stories that are in the book, they didn't happen exactly as written. They're real people or characters based on real people. The stories are fictional, although some of them have content which is based on actual conversations and actual experiences. But we made some artistic license there to make the stories a little more uniform and interesting. But anyway, since the book came out, we've been doing a lot more presentations, and the picture here, that picture there is when we were invited to go to St. Mary's University and give a astronomy and physics colloquium, which was quite an honor, because they usually only invite professional astronomers and physicists to give talks, and it was very special that they invited us. So that's us. Oh, and I should say, if you're looking for more resources on our project, go to linktree/Mi'kmaq Moons. You will find everything. Everything is there. Everything that we've shared is there. So, Cathy, maybe you could say a few words about two-eyed seeing from your perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I used to start off, I have a little bit of a different experience, and something I want to add to this, because just a couple of weeks ago, I got to spend the evening with Elder Albert Marshall. And I was telling him that he asked me why I co-wrote Mi'kmaq Moons. And I said, well, my journey, my want and love for two-eyed seeing actually started with him about 15 years ago or so now, when I was an interpreter at Keji. We got to go to Cape Breton University, and we were taking part in a workshop that Elder Albert Marshall and his late wife, Merdina Marshall, and Cheryl Bartlett were giving. And I remember being in the audience of that, and never had heard the concept of two-eyed seeing before. And when they started to talk about it, I just felt so excited inside, because at that time I was working at Keji, and we have the cultural history of the site, and we have the natural history of the site. And to have a concept that fuses both together was so just incredible to me, to see it through their eyes. So a couple of weeks ago, I said to him, I'm like, this is full circle for me, because you were such an inspiration to me throughout the years, throughout all of that time. And here we were, me sitting down with him and him saying to me, I really like your book. And I was like, I can't even process what that's like. Or what that felt like. But one of the things I do want to just mention is that he gifted me a copy of his new book, Walking Together. And it's a children's book, but it's beautiful. The illustrations are beautiful. And it really does a great job of describing what two-eyed seeing is. So even as adults, if you're wondering more after our presentation what that is, if you want to share this concept with your kids, your grandkids, whoever it may be, this is a really, really good resource. So yeah, that's where I learned about the concept of two-eyed seeing. And what I also learned, and Dave, I haven't even shared this with you yet. It's like new information. Elder Albert was saying to me, it's not even Western science and indigenous ways of knowing. It's whatever eye you have and view the world. It's that mixed with whatever it could be, however it is someone else sees the world. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't necessarily have to be indigenous and indigenous ways of knowing. It's whatever way of knowing. And you being able to understand and appreciate and respect that with the eye in which you see. So I found that really beautiful. And I thought, what a way in which, because I had always thought that it was an indigenous way of knowing and Western science way of knowing. And he so eloquently was sharing with me that it's really two people being able to learn from one another through respect and through, courageous conversation and through the will to really want to understand where someone else is coming from. And it kind of leads into what Dave and I always say about each other, because we started working together many, many years ago, many moons ago. And we started trying to understand astronomy, because being a cultural interpreter at Keji, and it becoming a dark sky cruiser, I felt the need and want to know some of the legends and stories, but then people started to ask me to point out constellations. And that was something that I had not any experience in. So I reached out to Dave, asked him to help me, because we were asked by Acadia First Nation to do a presentation on the Hunter's Moon. And so Dave and I started off hours and hours on the phone, me trying to understand the astronomy part, and him trying to understand the cultural history, the Mi'kmaq knowledge that I had. And, you know, it's not easy. A lot of people ask how you do two-eyed seeing. And I always say you have to be ready to go on the journey. And it's not overnight. And it does take time, because you really are trying to understand the lens in which someone else is seeing. And so that could be complex. But Dave and I pushed through, and we set up a safe zone right away where it was safe for him to ask me questions or make comments, and I was safe to do the same thing. So I know I asked a lot of non-intelligent questions, probably, Dave, and you too, but that was okay. That was okay. And yeah, so that's a little bit about two-eyed seeing. Is there anything you'd like to add, Dave?
You know, what you said is very complete. But
oh, good.
But I just want to say I'm very interested in what you said about Elder Albert Marshall recently, because the way he's looking at it now, or at least expressing it now, is actually very close to how we actually work together.
Yes.
Because as I recall, we didn't set out, oh, let's do two-eyed seeing. How do we do that? We just started working with one another, and we came from distinct. Everything about us is different. Age, gender, culture, and so you know, we're complementary, I guess. But it did take a long time to learn to work out the language that we could speak to one another. And it turned out that we were doing two-eyed seeing, and we sort of figured it out along the way. Is, hey, there's a name for this. And I think we had a conversation with Elder Albert early on, and we said, well, this is what we're doing. And I asked him, I said, so Elder Albert, are we doing two-eyed seeing? And he confirmed. He said, yes, you are. And that was a big, like you say, a big inspiration to us. And he's been a big supporter ever since. But maybe people would like to hear more about the Mi'kmaq moons themselves, right? So let's show them a few things. And there's quite a lot of information in this graphic, and we're not going to be able to do it all. But so basically, the Mi'kmaq more or less divided the year into 12 sort of segments, or 12 time periods. Now, mind you, I've got specific dates here, but that's not something that the Mi'kmaq would have done, for two reasons. One is that those dates are the Western calendar, which they were not familiar with before European contact. But also, I think that they saw the sky in past time more sort of relationally and observationally. I don't think they counted days, or were as precise as this picture would indicate. This is my kind of astronomical overlay to the tradition to try to bring it into the two-eyed seeing world. So it's as simple as this. The Earth goes around the sun. The Earth is tilted. The axis is tilted. So we have seasons. So we go through this whole sequence of seasons where different ecological activities are taking place. And if we divide it up into 12 segments like this, full moons appear in these segments, kind of like if you threw a ball into a roulette wheel at the casino. The ball has to end up in one of the little holes. So the full moons end up being in one of these segments, and so they take on, the full moon takes on the name of whatever time period that is. And on the right-hand side, you can see the English versions of the different times, starting just after the winter solstice with the tomcod spawning and so on, snow blinding time, maple sugar time. And you can see the connection with the ecology there. The way that I've divided this up in very precise dates is I'm using a concept in astronomy called solar longitude. So the sun goes around the ecliptic once every 365 days, and there's a certain point on the ecliptic, this imaginary line, which is 0 degrees. And so it's about it's 300, more or less 360 degrees divided into 12 segments. So what does that work out to? 30 degrees per segment. And then that translates to sort of date ranges in our Gregorian calendar. So this is just an aid to see how these things, but it gets a little bit more complicated than that, as you will see. Now, Cathy, you had a perspective on this succession of moon times.
Yeah, this graphic was the most, it just blew my mind when I saw it for the first time, because I was trying to understand astronomy in relation to my ancestors. And I say this in every presentation, but it's where I was. I went out and I bought Astronomy for Dummies, the book, and tried to read it. It still wasn't making sense. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm in really, really big trouble. But seeing this graphic for the first time, I got so excited, because what this is it's the Mi'kmaq people would have used what's happening in nature and the phases of the moon to tell a passage of time. And so everything in here is time is passing, something new and exciting is happening. And for people who lived off the land, survived on the land, needing to know what was coming next and what resources would be available was so important. And what I love about it too, what excites me the most, I'm using excite and passion a lot, is that I can still see this playing out. And I went on a journey with Holly years ago when she was around 5 years old. And her and I was teaching her the moon time names as they were happening. So I decided not to overwhelm her. And I also would say to the audience, if you are interested in teaching your children or yourselves, grandchildren, whoever it may be, this concept, do it as it's happening. Because those memories that you're creating are what you will remember and what your kids will remember, your grandkids. So her and I went through this journey of seeing all of these things happening in front of us and patiently waiting for the months to pass so that we knew what was coming up. And some of those experiences, as we said, are in the book. And so I remember, and I'll just share this one little story because it is relevant to Keji, MTRI being close to there, is the first time I saw it. I was actually driving home. And I remember Dave had called, we were talking about something, and I had him on Bluetooth, don't worry. And we were chatting, and I said, Dave, hold on. I said, my goodness, I have to find my sunglasses. I can't believe it's winter. And I still need my sunglasses. I cannot see a thing. And he said, well, Cathy, you do know what moon time we're going into. And I said, well, of course I do. It's my culture. And then I thought about it for a second, and I said, snow blinding moon time. And I remember, Dave, I was screaming. Yep. I was so excited because here it was happening. It was something that my ancestors would have experienced. And I was experiencing that. And I was sharing it with Dave. It was just such an exciting time. And then as we started to move along, Holly had those same experiences where her and I were sitting at the table having tea. And she said, Auntie, she said, what are those little things on the trees? I said, well, what do you think they are? She said, I don't know. I said, well, those are the buds. The leaves are going to grow on the trees. And she said, oh. And she said, I said to her, well, what moon time do you think we're in, Holly? And she said, I don't know, but I bet you it has something to do with trees. And I said, it does. We're going into trees fully leaved moon time. Yeah, so I just had to share that, Dave, because it is relevant to me driving home from there. But it was such an exciting thing, and it still is to this day to see things that are happening around us.
Well, I never get tired of hearing you tell that story. So maybe it's time. Maybe what we need to do is actually read a story from the book. So we're in the berry ripening time, and the full moon is going to take place on August the 1st. And so in Mi'kmaq, this is called Kizikewikus, berry ripening time. And so here's a typical, well, first of all, this beautiful illustration is by Loretta Gould, who drew 12 lovely illustrations plus a few other things, and the cover. And we're very, very pleased to have her artwork illustrating our words. I feel like when people pick the book up in the store, I think it's the artwork that sells the books, but the stories keep people reading. So I'm going to ask Cathy if she would read the Holly and Auntie story for berry ripening time.
Yeah, and this time too. Holly and I were together last night, and actually we were at a fair, and in the parking lot there were blueberries. And she was like, oh, there's blueberries. And of course I said, well, the time that we're going in right now. And she said, yeah, it's berry ripening time. But these are things too, if you're looking at going on this journey, or if you're looking at taking someone along with you, these are things like berry ripening time. You can actually take you, your family, whoever out on a journey to pick berries.
Sorry. I didn't mean to do that. Okay, I won't touch it anymore. I won't touch it.
That's okay. I could listen to Curtis's voice.
That's next.
That's next. So on a warm afternoon in late summer, Holly went to her auntie's for tea. She stopped on her way to pick wild blueberries all around the edge of her yard. Hi, Auntie. Look what I found. They were in the sunny places next to the forest and in the clearings where the sun shines through the trees. Oh, thank you, Holly. It's berry ripening time, and I was thinking about picking soon. Now we can have these with our tea. We can visit the U-Pick farm as well, but the wild ones are the sweetest tasting. After tea, they picked more blueberries and put them in plastic containers. As usual, Holly was full of questions. What will we do with all of these berries? We'll eat some fresh ones now, maybe make some blueberry grunt and freeze the rest, said Auntie. But what would our ancestors do? Asked Holly. They would gather blueberries and other berries into baskets and bowls made from birch bark. Then they would cook them into a stew over a fire and press them into flat cakes. Finally, they would dry the cakes in the sun so that the food would be stored to eat in the winter. Wow, that sounds like a ton of work, explained Holly. What other berries did our ancestors pick? Auntie thought for a bit and she replied, There are so many. Some are used for food and others for medicine. Our people picked blackberries, raspberries, and cranberries for sure, and also service berries. I've never heard of service berries, said Holly. What do they look like? They grow on shrubs, bigger than blueberry shrubs, and they are dark red and purple. Service berries and cranberries are some of my favorite for eating. But do you know what else service berry bushes are used for? Said Auntie. They show the time. In the spring, when the small white flowers appear on service berry bushes, it's time to fish in the rivers. The bushes are also called shad bushes for that reason. Cool, said Holly. Yes, and now it's time to eat more berries and make blueberry grunt for dessert tonight. And if we have time, let's make some jam too, said Auntie, putting on her apron.
That's great. Thanks, Cathy.
Mm-hmm.
So a few years ago, actually something like maybe 5 years ago now, we had an idea to do a project where, because people said, well, we don't know how to say the Mi'kmaq names. So it would be nice if you could teach people how to do that. So we had this idea to get our friend Curtis Michael, who's a language teacher, to make a number of very short videos, like they're half a minute long, so they don't take a long time to listen to. And we made one for all of the different moons, and we got some money to pay for all of this, and we had a professional videographer and editor. My good friend Haley Helmick was involved in that project, and of course Curtis. And we did it all in one day. We went over to his place and we set up and we recorded the videos, and then we took it down and we were done, except for the editing. So I'd like to show you the video for the berry ripening time. And I'd like to point out that the artwork here is by a young artist named Autumn McDonald, but she would have grown up in the meantime too. I have no idea how old she is now. But this was apparently her first, the first time she got paid to do any artwork. So we're very pleased to include her artwork here. And so if the technology works, then we'll listen to Curtis.
Gizigewigus, Gizigewigus, berry ripening moon. Gizigewigus, the berry ripening moon.
So like I said, we've got a number of those like that, very quick, on our YouTube channel. And so we've got, in the book, we've got basically 12 stories about the principal moons of the year. And we have another story that talks about the 13th moon, which we're going to get into before we finish. So Cathy, we were talking about how much content. Do you think we have time to do one more story before we talk about the 13th moon, or what do you feel?
I think we'll push through Dave, and that maybe want to leave some room for questions.
Okay.
Someone did ask in the chat though where to find the calendar. So if that specific image, you can still find at Cape Breton University.
Well, if they go to the link tree, which I'll show again, right. All of our content is there, and we've used that graphic. Unfortunately, the publisher didn't want to use that particular graphic in our book, so there's a similar but not exactly the same circular diagram in our book. But if you go to the link tree, you'll be able to find everything. Although we don't really refer to it as a calendar, but that's okay. Yeah. Okay, so we'll move on. We'll move on because in the story about the winter moon, the chief moon, there's a bunch of astronomy embedded, and we're going to talk about that anyway. So it would have been a bit of a duplication, but let's move on. But I would like to just play, because it's so short, let's play Curtis's wintertime moon, okay? It's only half a minute.
Gezigewigus, the winter moon. Gezigewigus, the winter moon. Gezik is our word for winter. Gezigewigus, the winter moon. Also heard Ukjigus, the great moon or the chief moon. The preverb Ukji means great. Ukjigus, the great moon.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, so we have a bit of a story about that. This is what I think is one of the more, and we're going to do some astronomy here, folks. Then enough of these nice stories and words. So I just wanted to point out that the full moon always does the opposite of what the sun is doing. So maybe not everyone's thought about this, but if you think about it, the full moon always rises when the sun sets. It's always in the opposite part of the sky. The sun sets, the full moon rises. And then when the full moon sets in the morning, the sun rises. So it's always doing the opposite. But the same thing happens summer and winter. We're familiar with the summertime. The sun at noon is high in the sky, and it gets very hot, and the sun is up for a very long time. But the moon in summertime is very low. The full moon doesn't get very much higher than the treetops, and it doesn't spend a lot of time in the sky. But in the winter, especially around December, the sun is low in the sky and doesn't spend much time up in the day, but the moon is very high in the sky and spends a long time in the sky. And so I've got some numbers there. So here in July, just past, the full moon was only up in the sky for a little over 8 hours, but in December coming, it'll be up in the sky for almost 17 hours. And the Mi'kmaq hunters, they used to use the full moon and the long hours of bright moonlight shining on the snow. They used to hunt at night and hunt moose at night, and they made use of it. And this is one thing that puzzled me, because I couldn't understand Chief Moon. It was the only one of the sequence that didn't relate to some earthly animal or some activity or plant. Chief Moon or Winter Moon, Chief Moon was different from all the rest. And then it struck me that because it's so high in the sky at that time, it's the highest moon of all the moons, and it's the longest lasting of all the full moons. And it sort of struck me after reading and thinking about it, that if you were going to pick one out to be the chief moon, it would be that one. The one in December, it would be the chief moon. It's the highest one. And it's the only one that doesn't relate to what's going on Earth. And there's another story that we didn't write called The Moon Chief, where an old couple appeals to the spirit of the moon in winter to send them a moose, and their prayers are answered. And that puzzled me a bit until I figured this out, that the chief moon is this very, very powerful spirit to the Mi'kmaq. And some of that is in the story for that moon time. So there would have been a bit of duplication there, but I was able to embed a lot of that astronomy into the stories with Cathy's permission. So we worked on these together, and I think we ended up with a nice product. So I want to talk to you a bit about the 13th moon, which you might have heard of. And there's a lot of confusion about 13th moon, but the astronomy is clear. So some years, depending on when you start and end the year, but some years have 12 full moons and other years have 13. I would say about 1 in 3 or 1 in 2 have 13 moons. You often hear that there's 13 moons in every year, and astronomically, that's not the case. If you look at the astronomy when they actually occur, some years have 12 and some have 13. So, and the 13th moon seems to have disappeared probably through colonialism and the traditions not being taught, and the different calendar system taking precedence. We could go on quite a long time about why that's the case. But here's the thing, and I need to do a little bit of math here and a little bit of astronomy, but hopefully it's going to be not too tough. So the solar cycle is 365 and a quarter days, and because of the tilt of the Earth, we get our seasons. If the Earth axis wasn't tilted, every day would be one as same as the other, and it would be a quite different climate here. But the tilt, the tilt is the reason for the season. Okay. And the other cycle that's important is the lunar cycle. And here's some lovely drawings by my good friend John Reed, who let us use them. So the moon cycle between one full moon and the next is 29 and a half days, which is shorter than the typical month that we have of 30 to 31 days. So you can sort of see, if you have 12 months of 30 to 31 days and the moon cycle is only 29 and a half, you can sort of see that there may be an issue stretching 12 full moons to fill a year. And that's exactly right. And we have to do some math, which is actually only arithmetic. So solar year is 365 and a quarter days. That gives you your seasons. The lunar month is 29 and a half days. That's the time between moons. But if you take 12 lunar months, you only get 354 days. So it's 11 days short. And if you do that 3 times, if you have 3 cycles of 12 moons, you end up being about a whole lunar month behind. So the names of the moons wouldn't jibe with the seasons. And that's what leads to the 13th moon phenomenon, where every so often you have to add in a moon in order to make things line up right. Now, if the moons had just ordinary names like Bob, Carol, Ted, and Alice, it wouldn't matter. But because the moon names relate to what's going on in the seasons, it matters. Now, as I said, traditionally the Mi'kmaq wouldn't have been counting days and doing this kind of mathematics. But what they would notice that the moons by their names were coming a little bit too soon in the cycle, and the people the sky watchers that were looking at that kind of thing would say that we've got to make an adjustment here. And there's a couple of ways you can do it. And so here's an example here. Last year in 2022, there's 12 moons in those pies, in those charts. And you can see there were 12 moons in the year. And then when we got to 2023, which is this year, this is a year where we have 13. And what you see here is that the full moons are coming really early in those little sectors I told you about. And so a couple of things happen. One is that it looks like you get 2 full moons in one of those sectors. So, and that's what we used to do. And on our page, we used to say, well, there's 2 full moons, so we'll just repeat it. In order to catch up, we'll repeat it. Or maybe I should say, in order to slow down, we have to repeat a moon in order so that the seasons can catch up. So that's what we used to do. But then recently we heard about another tradition which comes out of Cape Breton, and we're still working on this problem. It's not a done deal, and this is the new idea that we came across. Not new to us, but traditional, and it's called. The idea is to insert a new moon name, which is called the halfway moon. And the way it works is if you start counting in the springtime, which is the rebirth of life, if that's moon 1, if you start counting there and you go for 6 moons, those moons look like they're coming a bit early. So after 6 moons, then you insert this new name called the halfway moon, and it would be the 7th of 13. And then following that 7th one, there'd be 6 more to bring you back to the beginning again. Everything, but inserting that halfway moon puts everything in its rightful place. Otherwise, things would just get totally out of whack. So right now, people, alert watchers would have noticed that I said in our book, we say that the full moon, the berry ripening moon, shows up between August 7th and September 7th, but it's actually on the 1st of August this year. So it's too early. It's too early, according to the formula we put forward. So we have to do something about it. And what we're going to do at the end of this month is we're going to talk about that halfway moon, and that's how we're going to do it this year, to honor that particular tradition and see what people think about that. So, we're going to have 13 moons in 2023, and then next year, guess what? We're going to have a perfectly normal year with 12 moons, more or less in the center of their little sectors. Everything will be back to normal. So this is an example of using astronomy to interpret the tradition. This is two-eyed seeing at work. You won't find a lot of this in a lot of the teachings. We don't know what the teachings actually said. It's the teachings are largely lost, and we're still trying to see if we can find out more. And so if anybody out there knows anything, we would definitely like to hear from you. So there in a nutshell is the story about the 13th moon. And I think we're going to wrap up here and allow for some questions. There's a lot of people to acknowledge. I'm not going to name them all, but you can see there's a large group here. Many of them are indigenous and many of them are settlers. But we've had a lot of support from both sides, and but we shouldn't even think of them as sides, because we're coming together, we're reconciling, and this is our contribution to that. So, we've explained to you how the Mi'kmaq have used these 12 moons, and the moon names describe seasonal phenomena. The moons follow astronomical cycles, and sometimes we use a 13th moon. You want to add anything there, Cathy?
Yeah, and I would just say too that if anyone is looking for more of an opportunity or an opportunity to connect with your surroundings, above, below, this is such a great way of viewing time. It really has allowed me to view the passing of time so differently. I was a young mom flipping the calendar up, hurrying around, trying to, my time was, what do we have to do next? And oh my goodness, we have a birthday coming up. And the calendar was dictating that to me. And when I let that go and got excited for time passing, because I knew I was going to be able to experience something happening in nature and above with my kids and my niece and myself, it grounded me in a whole new way. And my appreciation for time and time passing changed. So yeah, that's a little bit about my story. And I think what's interesting too, Dave, is that in our project during COVID, we started to get very busy and people wanting presentations and wanting opportunities for themselves and others to reconnect with what's around them. So yeah, I would like to end by just saying Walalan to all of you, Lalio, for hearing us tonight. I wasn't able to see any faces. All I'm able to see is Dave this whole time. So, which is okay by me, Dave. But we really do. We're so grateful for the opportunity. Thank you so much to MTRI for thinking about us and for bringing us in. And if anyone has any questions that we're able to answer, we would be happy to do so.
Well, thanks, Cathy. Yeah, that was a good summary So just before we go to the question period, there's now a word from our sponsor. So I've mentioned the link tree many times, and there's lots of free information there. I mean, honestly, if you went there, you could spend a long time reading all the things that we've shared, that we've done on our own time, mostly without any kind of remuneration. But we've shared it freely for people to learn. If you want to support our project, of course, you can buy our book. And so if you would like to buy a book directly from us, which benefits us better than getting it at a bookstore, we have a limited number of signed copies left. And so there's a number of different ways you could get them. If you live in the South Shore around Bridgewater, talk to Cathy. She has some there, and maybe she can connect with you and make that transfer possible. So she lives in the Bridgewater area. In HRM, I have some here. If you're in HRM, I'm happy to meet with anyone and make a transfer. We can also do online. If somebody sent us an email at the address here, we can ship anywhere in Canada. We can ship our book for the cost of the book plus just a few bucks shipping, and we'll accept the payment by e-transfer. Beyond that, of course, I mean, there's local bookstores around that have the book. And then there's the typical online vendors. You know who they are that will, you can buy the book there and have it mailed to you. I'd like to say something about Indigo. If you live near a chapter store and they don't have the book itself on the shelf, you can order it on Indigo and have them send it to your local store and then go pick it up. So it wouldn't cost you anything for shipping. So I do like that about their system. So having said that, maybe we can move on to some questions now.
Thank you so much, both of you, Cathy and Dave, for your fantastic talk. I really enjoyed it. I'm sure the audience did too. As you guys mentioned, we'll now move into the question period. So for anyone watching live, feel free to ask your questions now. And in a moment here, we'll also be sharing the questions from the chat online. So for all the viewers, feel free to go ahead and ask questions.
I wanted to thank Jane Barker. She's doing a good job of monitoring the chat and leading people to the right places. So whoever Jane is, thank you very much.
I can't take the credit for that, Dave. I think Chad's probably doing that. My video won't start, but there we go. Yeah.
Okay. Anyhow, thanks MTRI for doing that. I did see one question. I think we've answered most of them, but I did see one question in the chat, and from Mary McIntosh, and she wanted to know if the 13 moon years have any connection with the leap years. And the answer to that is yes and no. It's not a direct connection in the way you might think, but the way that we're adding in a moon every 3 years or so to keep things in line is very analogous to the leap year phenomenon. They call it leap year, but what's actually happening in a leap year is they're adding in a day. We're adding in a day to the typical calendar so that the length of you can only have an integer number of days, but the actual length of the year is 365 and a quarter. So every 4 years we throw in an extra day to keep things in line. And this is exactly what's happening with the 13th moon, but in that case, we're keeping the moons in line with the sun, not the days of the year. But it's a good question. Thank you for that.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi.
Okay. This is Jackie. I'm coming in from Woodstock, Ontario. Thank you so much for this presentation. It was really outstanding. I do look forward to your book, and I will reach out. As far as the East Coast, how do you engage is there any activities that you're aware of where I can engage my grandchildren further in this story? I do love the dark skies, and I'm over on North Mountain, where the view is just beautiful. But I'd like to take them into nature a little bit. Is there any opportunities that way that you could share? Like a night viewing?
Maybe I should answer that, Kathy?
Yeah.
Okay, so Ketchum-Kujik National Park and National Historic Site is an RASC dark sky preserve. So it's a naturally dark place away from light pollution, and the people who manage the park are very careful about their lighting, and there's a number of places in the park where you can go and get a pretty good look at the sky. Down at some of the beaches on the lake, there's a thing called the Sky Circle, which is really close to the campground. There's a bit of light around, but it's still pretty dark. And you can go there anytime that you're in the park and go and sit up on this platform, which is called the Sky Circle. I sometimes call it an outdoor planetarium because it's like a planetarium, except it's real. You sit in it and you see the real stars. So it's an outdoor planetarium, sort of when it's clear. Coming up every August, we have something called the Dark Sky Weekend. This year it starts on the 11th of August. And we have 3 nights of where we present the RASC, the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, presents the sky, weather permitting. Now the trick is that the park itself gets very full at this time. I looked the other day and there's just no accommodation to be had. But if you get nearby accommodation, you can come to the park and take part in the programs, which themselves are free. There's no charge for the programs. But if you want to enter the park, there's a fee. And if you want to camp. Beyond that, there's different places around you can go, but I guess you just have to know where to go. But you have to find a place away from lights to really appreciate the dark sky. And Southwest Nova Scotia has a lot of those places. There's a new place starting up called Stargaze Nova Scotia, which is on the road to Peggy's Cove near Eastover. A friend of mine named John Reed bought the property and he's developing that. And he's trying to, eventually people from the city will be able to go out there and appreciate the sky. I think that's about it. Does that help?
I really value that information. I was aware of a little bit of it, but not all of it. And I know that I'm going to have a wonderful time when I'm at my property this August. And thank you for letting me know about some of these events. I do appreciate it. Incredible presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, what I love about this too is that it can be done anywhere in your backyard. These experiences, in nature, or it's wherever nature is for you, right? And it's about connecting that and having those, experiences where walking, with your children, grandchildren on a trail, any trail, or out in the backyard, in the forest. Like it can be done anywhere. And it really is just, I always say to people, create your own stories. Like these are stories from my culture that I've experienced with my niece, but I would be so excited to hear other people's stories and the things that they've experienced in the seasons and the moon times when they happen. So, that helps too.
I saw a question in the chat from Sue asking about if there were any Mi'kmaq stories about life on the moon. To the best of my knowledge, there aren't. Cathy, do you have anything?
No, I don't, Sue.
The only thing I would say along those lines is the Mi'kmaq language and the Mi'kmaq culture. Everything is a spirit. Everything is a spirit. Even a rock has a spirit. And that's what I've learned. And in the Mi'kmaq way of speaking, the sun is the grandfather sun and the moon is grandmother moon. So in that sense, those heavenly bodies represent spirits, and I'll leave it at that. But in terms of actual life on the moon, well, I don't think there's anything quite like that. Was there anything on Facebook Live?
And that's not to say, Sue, that I think the beauty of Dave and I and what we do is these are our stories and our teachings and the teachings I have from my elders. And, you know, when you go to different locations, different places in Mi'kmaq, you'll hear different stories and different experiences. So, you know, just because I have not heard or Dave has not heard, keep asking that question. Keep being inquisitive to other people, because, you know, it's an oral tradition, and people, just because that's not a teaching I have doesn't mean that isn't a teaching that someone else has.
I do have one question here. This one's for myself, and it's about whether or not you're aware of other First Nations and their moon cycles and the associated seasons. So is this a really Mi'kmaq specific thing?
I've looked into that a lot.
Go ahead, Dave. Yeah.
What we're communicating is the Mi'kmaq stories, the Mi'kmaq tradition. We're not denying the others, but if you go across North America, you will see that the pattern that we have explained is repeated again and again. However, each nation has its own names, its own characteristics. There are some things that line up. Every so often you see something, oh, look, you know, they've got a frog moon as well. But what you have to realize is that everybody they're following the same general tradition. What they're doing is they're reflecting nature in their names for the moon. So as you go from one place to another across North America, clearly things change, and people have different flora and fauna and different things happening, and that's what you see. And so there's the Saanich on the West Coast. They have a whole moon cycle, and it seemed to me, I've studied it a bit. It seems to me that many of the moons there have to do with the salmon, and the because that's so important to them. I mean, here we have the moose, but on the West Coast, the salmon is the important food, and their moon cycles have a lot to do with the salmon. And then there's the Cree in between. One interesting thing that I like to point out is that we don't, in the Mi'kmaq tradition, there's no harvest moon. There's no, other than harvesting berries, picking berries. But in the fall, there's no harvest moon like you find. And the reason is because the Mi'kmaq traditionally were hunter-gatherers, and they hunted moose, and moose was the principal food. They didn't grow things, but as you move farther west into the Great Lakes area, then there you find indigenous people growing things, corn and beans, and they had a harvest moon. So this is how it changes as you go across the North America.
And I would say, Dave, too, that the moon names can change community to community.
Yes.
We've had people engage with us who have said, we know, our family knows this moon as this. What we always say is we value that. And we value that community, family to family, how people see things and experience things can change and shift.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the one that starts our book is Wigum Gewi Goose, which is the mate calling time. But in some communities, it's called Time to Leave. It has a completely different name in Mi'kmaq, and it means time to leave. And I thought it might be an extra name, but it turns out it's a variant, and that is because the Mi'kmaq were semi-nomadic, and in the fall they would leave They would leave the coast where they had been gathering seafood and so on, and they would move inland. And so they call it, there's communities that called it, it's time to leave, time to pack up the wigwams and go inland.
Mm.
So there's a good example. And we actually mentioned that in the book as an alternate.
Mm.
How are we doing?
Yeah, thank you very much for that response. That was great. Thank you. Yeah, chat, do we have any questions over on the Facebook chat?
No questions, just lots of thank yous and kudos for an
Great.
excellent presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure to present to such a engaged audience with lots of really cool questions. Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, and at this stage, I would just really like to thank both of you, Cathy and David, again for your fantastic presentation and your fantastic talk. It was really, really brilliant, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And also thank you to everyone else for joining us tonight. At this stage, I would just quickly like to thank our sponsor as well, the region of Queens, for supporting the seminar tonight and making this possible. And as always, you can stay up to date with our seminar series by following us on Facebook, Instagram, any of our social media. And if you would like to watch tonight's seminar again, or there might be people that missed it, this is also going to be available on our Facebook Live video or on our YouTube channel. And don't forget, we'll be again hosting another seminar next week and throughout the whole week of August. For next week's seminar, we'll be joined by Taylor Swanberg from Acadia University. She'll be sharing her research on invasive mosquitoes and their surveillance in Nova Scotia with us. And that seminar will be held at the exact same time again from 7 to 8 next Thursday online. And yeah, once again, thank you very much for everyone. Thank you especially Cathy and Dave. And hope everyone stays well, and we get to see all of you again very soon. Good night.